Hi everyone. I am here and I'm here waiting for Nate Nainers to join the video for his artist talk. And Nate Nainers, you're here, so if we can request, if you can request to join the live, then I can let you in. All right, it looks like he just requested me, and I accept his go. And hopefully it's starting. Go live. There it is. Nate Nader. There you are.
Hey, just real quick. My pronouns are they, she. Yeah, just real quick about that. But
Oh, sorry.
yeah, happy to.
Sorry,
Oh,
Nate.
good.
I think I just started the artist talk with a little misgendering. Sorry about that.
It's all good. It's all good. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I go by they, them, but I think you already know that for like a year or so, so nothing new there. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Awesome. Well, we're here to talk about your art today, so maybe we should just start off with like a who are you and a little introduction to yourselves for people that are joining in.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Nate Nainers. I'm a storyteller and a poet and a um, sorry, there's a little bit of feedback on the phone. I'm gonna try to
Oh,
turn this down a little bit. It's it's a little distracting. Yeah, I'm a storyteller and poet and performance artist, and I grew up on Katzie and Kwantlen territories, unceded territories, and currently live on Coquitlam unceded territories. Those places are known as Maple Ridge and Port Coquitlam in settler language. But yeah, I've been at storytelling for a while now. Narrative is kind of my favorite medium to work with, either writing stories or telling stories orally on the stage. Yeah, and again, my pronouns are they, she, and a lot of what I've been working with lately is yeah, sort of. So I'm schizoaffective, which is a blend of schizophrenia and bipolar. And what I've been working a lot with in my work lately is sort of, I guess, representing sort of states of minds that come with the condition that I have, and sort of trying to use that as like an aesthetic in some ways and also content in other ways. So yeah, that's and not yeah, I guess it's more not so much broad as like a neurodivergent content or neurodivergent aesthetic, but specifically schizoid. Because as I've been kind of working on my recovery since diagnosis and all this type of stuff, I've been realizing not everybody has the same relationship to their mental health conditions, and they're all so unique and they have their own challenges. And some people say there are no positives to their mental health conditions, and that's their own journey, that's their own conclusions, and that's fair if that's true for them. But where I've been coming to in my work is coming to a place of joy for the condition that I have. And I want to express that joy through wild stories and getting zany and getting unhinged and getting out there and kind of walking away from consensus reality at times. And I see a lot of my work as kind of taking people on journeys. That's sort of like what I really see myself doing. That's how I feel when I'm working, when I'm working on my stories, whether that's like written or orally or whatever, is I myself am going through a journey, and I don't know exactly where I'm going to end up when I start writing or when I start doing all this type of stuff. It's just a, a method of just letting my mind unfold, I guess, and just following it as it's unfolding, and kind of getting to a final conclusion. And maybe that takes me many, many pages, and maybe that takes me not very long at all. But yeah, so I feel like it's sort of, I like sort of this schizoid, reflective and unfolding, that sort of kind of thing. So that's a lot of words for what I do. Yeah, yeah.
I love it though. I'm like, I could easily just let you just keep talking and I would just love listening to you even more.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. What else can I say about my work? I did write some things down, but now that I wrote them down, they feel like words I was trying to sound smart with or
Mm.
whatever. And I guess that actually is kind of part of my process too. Is I really having gone through uh, post-secondary and going to UBC and all this type of stuff, I felt like there was a lot of expectations on students, especially literary students, to sort of like adopt this sense of pretension. They would never say pretension, but they want it nonetheless. And I feel like that's been sort of part of my process too, is working with very colloquial language, just very down to earth language. I work a lot in trades jobs, labor jobs, all this type of stuff. And I just love the way everybody talks. I don't necessarily love what they're talking about, but I love the way they talk, and it's so direct. And that is something that I've adopted into my craft and into my way of speaking, is sort of like the trades thing. But obviously, I have my own literary flares and all this type of stuff. So I try to kind of like marriage those two worlds together in what I do. So um, yeah, it's working in the trades is very interesting that way, because there's some very, very colorful language and very colorful characters, which has been an endless supply of material for me to work with. But at the same time, there's just some really heavy stuff that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I guess like kind of coming back to this project, when we're kind of like how does, because I'm not really working, this is like before I even had a job. This story takes place before, well, I guess I did have a job. I was a Little Caesars sign person. I actually held the sign for Little Caesars and shook it for the $5 hot and ready. That was like one of my high school jobs. But anyway, back to, yeah. So just kind of this story is about growing up in a religious environment. Yeah, I think I said this a little bit um, in my residency intro, is that I grew up, I was steeped in fundamentalism. That was like my home church. That was my school. That was both elementary, middle school, and high school. That was my summer camps. I was a youth group kid. I would go to like 3 different youth groups, sometimes 4 different youth groups a week, every week. And I was on the worship team and all this type of stuff. And yeah, something I was thinking about today, about sort of how this all, yeah, just the whole project is how much of this is really sort of processing kind of like a sense of control. I found that's, yeah, something I was thinking about today, that that a lot of these fundamentalist environments, they, I feel like the way they see themselves, because it was the way I saw myself while I was a fundamentalist, was offering structure to the congregation and offering some sort of like, if people don't have structure, then the world is chaotic and everything like that, and people need to have like strong boundaries of what is good and what is evil and what is all these sorts of things, and thinking that that structure gives purpose or whatever. And obviously it's all filtered through salvation and heaven and hell and all this type of stuff. But obviously, as my residency, as I've been uncovering in my residency, is it's very harmful, because it's not so much structure as it is like suffocation, and it's ironic, because I feel like a lot of conversations around fundamentalism is sort of like, oh, these fundamentalists hate gay people, they hate trans people, they hate all these different people because they don't fit the norm. But I think there needs to be some sort of understanding that the fundamentalists don't fit their own norms either, especially when we're, say, talking about sexuality or something like that. I am way out of the norm for a fundamentalist, for who I have sex with, how I have sex, all this type of stuff. But at the same time, there's people that might be protesting for my rights or all these sorts of things, protesting against my rights, but they might also be having, they are neglecting their own sexuality in other ways, like in how cutting out a little bit. Oh, there we go. You're back. Yeah, I grew up with lots of people, like gay sex was like beyond the pale, but there's even other things like just, obviously no oral sex or whatever, and the spilling of the seed and all these sorts of things. And just, there's people that are really sexually frustrated that they can't indulge in their own sexual fantasies and their own sexuality. And yeah, and so I just kind of see that sort of like, it's sad that fundamentalists are, their framework is hurting themselves as well, and it's not necessarily because they are gay. They could be totally cis and straight and all this type of stuff, but their worldview just, there's a lot of that, again, that structure that they think is keeping them from going unhinged or out of control, is suffocating them as well. So when they see me living my life and hear of me living my life, I think there's a lot of resentment that I get to do this, living in my sin, while they are suffering so much to keep the structure together, So, yeah, and on that note, I think that's also kind of like how, what as I've been reflecting on my story, is just looking at how the structure is what the structure of the story is kind of like as well. In that, like, there seems to be a break in consensus reality. There seems to be a break in a linear movement and everything. And in that sort of sense, it's kind of like breaking against that structure and resisting against that sort of like dominant structure to keep everything. What's the word I'm looking for? Keeping everything, I guess, normal, or keeping everything cohesive or whatever. So, yeah, now I'm feeling like I'm trying to sound too smart again.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, it is smart. Like, you are smart, so you can't just, pretend you're not smart because you are smart. But like, I didn't feel like those were hoity. I didn't feel like the words were hoity-toity or anything like that.
Okay.
I really resonated with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like that. I
Yeah.
like this. And I really related to what you're talking about. Like, I grew up in the church as well, similar background. We've talked about this many times, but like, like the damage that it does to their own self. So before they're out there trying to damage my rights or your rights, or they're already taking down themselves already. Like,
Yeah.
they're already engaged in that kind of like self-harm that way, in that community harm, the way that, like, that kind of like such narrow view of sexuality and sex. Like, I grew up slightly more liberal than you, but still not that much more liberal than you, like.
Yeah, and especially now now that gender is like such a big contentious issue and all this type of stuff, and it's become the new knee-jerk reaction button or whatever. It's it's a little much. And but I think that's sort of like, that's kind of part of my, like, as I'm sort of there's also a lot of stuff about like the end times and like the apocalypse and the antichrist and all this type of stuff. So I feel like that is, yeah, that is like, yeah, I don't want to give too much away because the story is still unfolding and everything, but I think there should be kind of something said about that, in that um, it's, I don't know, as I've been working on that, I just can't help but kind of see parallels to well-meaning people that are also talking about today being the apocalypse and the end times and all this type of stuff. And I think that's kind of why I might have, I mean, like I said, I just let my brain unfold, and whatever comes out, and then that's the story. And I craft it, and I try to make it, functional, but I don't go in with preconceived notions. But I feel like what was kind of coming out is just sort of this, like, as a child, when adults are talking about the end times, and when children start talking with other children about the end times, or when they're talking with teenagers about the end times, and everybody sort of has this like very intense sort of, all these intense conversations, and they do start getting distorted. And I really did have real conversations with people at camp, people at school, people in church, about this weird gay witch army. And this isn't coming from the pastor, but this is coming from my peers, and you're wondering, well, where are they getting it from? And where is all this sort of like intensity coming from, where people are now starting to engage imaginatively about what the Antichrist could do and how he could murder you, and how all these sorts of really heavy, really heavy things, and just kind of getting carried away with it. And I don't know, I just feel like it's so hard on a child. It's just so brutal on a child. I was not able to listen to anything on the news related to Israel without having a panic attack until I was
Mm.
in like my early mid 20s. And that's
Wow.
when I left the church. And that's because of the whole rapture theology around Israel and Palestine unifying, and that would be the ultimate sign of the end times, and only the Antichrist will bring Israel and Palestine together, and all this type of stuff. And of course, when September 11th happened, everybody fucking lost their mind. You know, everybody really lost it and really thought that like the end times are right now. We are living in them, you know. And I just see parallels to um, what is going on now, like when people, as we were kind of like going through the pandemic and everything, and people talking about the end times, and we're living in the apocalypse, and the world is societal collapse, and civilization is crumbling, and humanity the days of humanity are numbered, and all this type of stuff. And I don't want to get into a debate about whether or not that is true, but it's just, I don't know, I just can't help but wonder, are children living through these times now, are they going to be developing the same complex that I developed, having so much intensity and so many conversations about the world literally ending in a
Mm-hmm.
catastrophic way, that and evil wins, you know, the billionaires win, the billionaires are the antichrist, you know. So I don't know. I don't know. I just wanted to bring up that question. I don't have an answer for that question, but I just feel like working on this project has been kind of like bringing that question up to me, and I
Hmm.
don't have an answer for it, but um, and in some ways it's kind of like, I don't know. It's been interesting because working on a in a poetic on a poetic level, working on a project that is about the end times has actually been drawing me into thoughts about creation,
Hmm.
and that's sort of where the joy, having worked on all these memories of Antichrist and like, you know, all this trauma or whatever, eventually I feel like I got what I needed out of it, and then moved into this place of creation, you know, and um and honoring creation, and being connected to creation. And I've always felt myself to be sort of like, you know, hippy dippy. I love nature, you know. But moving through this project has really brought me into sort of like I guess another level for myself of appreciating creation, and has,
Hmm.
in a sense, well, in a very real sense, has kind of like drawn me back um, into a relationship with God,
Hmm.
which I didn't really see coming, but,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it did. It was interesting. It was like, okay, processing the rapture, processing end times, apocalypse, draws me into creation, and that draws me into the creator, you know. And that's been circling back to this conversation we were having earlier about control and form and structure and all this type of stuff, is um yeah, it's been having been so deeply religious. I felt like a lot of it a lot of my life was controlled in so many ways, and especially spiritually controlled. Is like, this is what God is like. This is how you communicate to God. These are the songs we sing to God. These are, you know, this
Hmm.
is what your relationship to God should look like, and this is what you should
Hmm.
feel when you're talking to God, and all these sorts of things, you know. And
Yeah.
people in my life had varying levels of structure related around my relationship to God. But yeah, there is that sort of level of control, and kind of where I've come to through this project is just kind of coming to a very personal sense, a very personal connection to a creator, and whether that's I don't know, just I I feel like that's kind of like that's been the best thing coming out of this, or going through this, getting that out of this. Um, yeah, I'm just gonna pour myself some tea because I've been wanting
I
some.
have tea right here.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I just made myself some lemon balm, lemongrass, peppermint, and sage. Yeah,
Nice.
that's my
That's cool.
my little treat. Yeah, yeah,
It's super relatable. Like listening to you talk, I'm like, yep, I relate, I relate, I relate. I've been through it. I love what you're like. These are the songs we sing to God. This is how you pray to God. This is what it looks like. This is how you feel when you're praying. This is how it should impact your
yeah,
life. And then
and
if you have the fruits of the Spirit, then this is how you can tell if what a real believer looks like. And
yeah, yeah, and it's funny because like in this project, I've also been uncovering. Um, like, I mean, I wasn't diagnosed and treated for schizoaffective until my late 20s. I think I was like 27 or something like that, or 28.
mm-hmm.
So a lot of my and and this is kind of like I have a few thoughts about this, but I wasn't treated for my condition as a teenager, especially, and I would have these sort of experiences where I would feel like I'm drowning, you know, which I talk about in the project and everything, and it's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's sort of one of these weird things of like, what, yeah, I don't know, feel like what is actually, like, what constitutes as a spiritual experience, what constitutes as a good spiritual experience, and like what is the goal of the spiritual experience, and all these sorts of things, you know. And I don't know, I think like back then there was just so much around just escaping, being, like I say, like being in that somewhere else, of just like being lost in the water, deep in the water, and um, being sort of like untouchable in that sort of sense, and that could have been disassociation, and that could have also been like a legit spiritual experience as well. And maybe some people would hear that and be like, oh, that's a negative spiritual experience, or that was and maybe it's just what I needed. It's just what I needed to insulate myself from, I mean, when you think about being underwater or being in water, it's a good place to go when there's fire raging around you. Go underwater. And yeah, but yeah, it's interesting, those sorts of experiences. Um, and yeah, you can get lost in them, if you pursue them too much, which is where I think I really got carried away with drugs. Was trying to chase after those sort of experiences, those highs, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, you
'Cause-
can't recreate what like 300 people coming together with a shared spiritual belief, all singing the same songs and like doing the same thing. Like it's a specific like environment that brings about a specific sort of spiritual high. Like I remember
yeah,
feeling that too when I left the church, just being like, do I just not experience the same spiritual reality? And partly yes, like you are leaving like a very specific spiritual incubator where like even if it's toxic and problematic in a lot of ways, there are like a lot of kind of good features about it too, you know, like the sense of community, the sense of care, the sense like yes, there's policing and gossip too, but there's also a
Yeah.
sense of like interconnection and like intergenerational connection and you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, this is kind of the thing. Like, Mike, I know Mike sounds, I won't say what Mike's real name is,
Yeah, yeah.
but Mike is a real guy. Mike is like a real ass guy who was my guitar teacher and would legitimately smoke weed in front of me. And I forget how old I was when he was smoking weed in front of me. My memory of like that age, that time period is so fractured, which is also why the story structure is so fractured as well, bumping in between all these sorts of things, because that's how I remember that time of life. But yeah, Mike, but at the same time, Mike and I would have these beautiful, really, really beautiful experiences with each other through music, you know, through musicality. And whether that was like playing guitars with each other for like, I remember we played a song for like 1 hour. It was just like
Whoa.
one constant song for an hour, and we were just like the song changed over and over and over again, you know, and just like the lights started getting brighter and all this type of stuff, and it was just like, whoa, something is really happening here. But then at the same time, when I turned 19, that's when we started drinking together, and he would drive around he would like drive home drunk sometimes, or not like so drunk, but just like you shouldn't be driving, you know. And it's just like that's something I find interesting too, is sort of these problematic people, you know, that are still able to tap into these beautiful experiences, you know, and offer that shared experience with somebody else. And I think that's something I found interesting, you know, where something I've been thinking about lately is sort of like this level of being a good person, in a sense where, you know, we kind of start off with just like survival. We need to survive. And so whatever you do to survive is good. And then we kind of move into morals and like, okay, well, we have rules, and the rules, you know, again, with the structure, and if you follow the rules, you're good. And then we kind of move up to ethics, and it's like, well, things are kind of like interpretive, and, you know, as long as you have good values, you know, it's good. And then we kind of move up again, I think, to compassion. And when you start like actually, when you can feel in your heart the love for others, and when you just actually care, you know. And I think that's one of the sad things I think about being a human, and just being in society, is that there's so many people that can um, have the ethics or have the morals, but not have the compassion, you know. And I think that's sort of like,
Yeah.
it's a tricky thing that way, you know, where somebody
Yeah.
can really be throwing off or putting out their moral high ground, or putting out all their values and all this type of stuff. But when it comes to actually like having a heart and lending a hand and helping people and all this type of stuff, it can be, um, I don't know, sorry, this is distracting
No, I
right
love.
now.
Sorry. I've just got really cold and I'm trying to find a sweater.
Oh, okay. It's all
Sorry
good.
for distracting you. I just really
Yeah,
am chilly.
yeah,
Yeah, the whole idea of like people with values but without compassion is really strikes a chord with me. You know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it kind of goes back to, I think, that sort of like fitting within the structure or whatever, and showing that you are a functional member within the structure and all that type of stuff. Yeah.
And if you're focused so much on this compliance, you miss out on the connection.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of like the thing. One of the things kind of going on in this story is that all these experiences, now we're kind of into this spiritual experience world in the story. And that's kind of, that's really where it starts, is when there's this connection, when the connection has been made between Mike and I. When Mike is actually like, let's play music together. Let's actually share an experience. Because for me, Mike really was, I feel like Mike was one of my first friends that was like me. I had friends, but I had friends that weren't creative weirdos or whatever. And Mike really was sort of my creative weirdo friend. And we would we went to Bellingham Costco one time from Maple Ridge, which was like, I think like a 3-hour drive, and we beatboxed the entire time. We just did little boops and bops and everything like that, and we would not stop. Even when we got to the border guard, I kept it going with just like, and just so the border guard couldn't hear. And then we got through the border, and we kept it up again, and we're like, yeah, it never stopped. And like, oh man, just weird stuff like that. But it was like, I think that's something that I'm realizing in this project, in this story, is that it's sort of kind of, there's way more people in these memories. There's like the men's breakfast and all this type of stuff, but it's very lonely. It's there is no connection. It's just like putting out fear, is pushing out like dread, existential dread, and all this type of stuff. But then when it comes to Mike, Mike is not concerned about the end times or any of that type of stuff. Mike doesn't seem to be concerned about anything else other than just connecting for a moment through music. And I think that's sort of like that's I really value our friendship. We've drifted apart over the years, but I really did value that friendship in teaching me what it really means to be an artist and what it means to be a musician and all this type of stuff. Is not to just sort of like just spew everything out there and just kind of like slap some stuff against the wall and make money or whatever, but to actually connect. And I guess that's what's been fun about this project, is just connecting with that younger self of mine, and connecting with the people that I'm sharing it with, of like, this is me, this is my story, this is what I've gone through, and not as a sense of like, oh, I should be felt sorry for or anything like that, but as a way of like, I think my story can be a point of reflection, and that's really what I want to be doing in all of my work, is giving points and spots and places of reflection for the audience, to just kind of draw people into somewhere a little deeper, and to just, I don't know, I don't really have any, I guess, I don't really go in with something that's always kind of struck me, that I've kept with me from a high school teacher, is that he said that wise people don't tell you what the answer is. Wise people respond to the question with another question. And that's always been sort of interesting to me is like furthering the conversation, and not as a bucking it back to you sort of thing, but like incorporating the question and understanding the question, and then being able to push the conversation further, and so I feel like that's sort of I adopt that in my work, in sort of like trying to make it a point of reflection, in a sense, in that, and I am saying stuff, I'm not like apolitical or whatever, but yeah, I'm much more curious about what people take away from the story themselves than if they got it or whatever, or if they understood what I was talking about or whatever. Yeah.
I like it. I like hearing all about this stuff. And I love the idea of like the question, answering the question, and just keeping the conversation going, because especially around topics like, I would say, like trauma and the Antichrist and, conservative Christianity, and also just connection. Like all those things are like the amount of real conversations I've had with people that like believe in anti-abortion, or they believe that homosexuality is a sin. Like I've connected deeply with hundreds of these people, and like it's really weird now because we're in such like a deep cultural landscape of like cancel culture. So like if I don't agree with everything that you say, I can't have a conversation with you. But if you can't connect with a person, how are you supposed to dialogue across difference? How are you supposed to share ideas? They'll just become more polarized.
Yeah, I can feel that. I can feel that. I'm still not quite sure where I stand on the whole cancel culture debate, because I see so many good points on either side, but what I do want to be doing is keep that conversation going, keep the conversation of if we need cancel culture or not, is there a cancel culture, all this type of stuff. But yeah, I feel like I'm much more interested in building bridges. I'm much, much more interested in building bridges. And I like, yeah, yeah, I guess I can say this, but yeah, as we know, I grew up in a homophobic environment and transphobic environment and all this type of stuff. And I also, since I think 2018 until last year, so for like 5 years pretty much, I was living with my parents. And I was living with my parents as a queer person, and as somebody that was coming to terms with their non-binariness and all this type of stuff, with my gender. Take the wall down and build a bridge. That's right, Dad. That's my dad. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that's my dad, Stan 190. Yeah. Hey, Dad.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
So I lived with my parents, and we just had conversations. We had conversation after conversation. And sometimes the conversations were uncomfortable, and sometimes they were awkward, and sometimes they were really beautiful. And I'm glad we had them, and I feel like we were able to take something away from it. And they weren't necessarily always conversations about gender and sexuality or anything like that. It was just, we were connecting again, and they were able to connect to their, queer child again, and just kind of see that I'm not sort of swept up in some sort of like idea of what radical queer is like or everything like that. They can actually just see me as their child, and who loves them in return. And being able to bridge that. My mom now is actually on a committee at her school to kind of raise awareness and raise respect for queer and trans kids at the school, you know? And that's like, I think that's not all me, but that's definitely my mom working on that herself and going through that process and asking those questions and everything. But that's the benefit I see of building the bridges, you know. And that, I guess, in a way, is very Christian of me. And that sort of this like queer redemption or whatever. But it really is, I really believe it takes a much longer time to build a bridge than it does to tear it down, you know. And I think if we want to get anywhere, we need to be putting in the time and the effort to be building those bridges, because it's so worth it. Because then people get to move around, people get across the river and not get swept away and all this type of stuff, you know. So it's yeah, I really, and that's sort of like, I mean, I am airing a lot of pain in this project, but also I feel like that is also me, in a sense, connecting with the people that I was in that environment with, because I know they probably felt the same pain too, you know. So I do hope people from high school will see my residency. I hashtag Jesus art. I hashtagged Jesus art because I do want Christians who are interested in art to see my residency. I want them to also kind of like reflect on the rapture theology and gender and queerness within Christianity, Christian circles, and all this type of stuff. And that's sort of been kind of where I'm going now in my work, is kind of getting myself to a point of building more bridges. And I am just so, I don't know, I just love how that bridge with myself and my family has been made, and how meaningful that is to me now, and how beautiful that is to me now. And that inspires me to build bridges with more people, you know. So that's sort of, yeah, so I guess like maybe right off the bat, maybe people thought this project was going to be more of like a sarcastic takedown of the church or something, but that's been said so many times, and that has its place, you know, that has its place. But you know, I think we really do need to be putting in the time and making the relationships and connecting with everybody, as many people as we can, you know. So
Yeah, I like that. I agree wholeheartedly. You know, it's like the cynical takedown of the church is a tired tale. You know, like I guess.
yeah, and I mean the church definitely has its crimes.
Oh yeah, we need to. We need to definitely have. I'm not defending the church. I'm just saying that like it's
Yeah.
like in terms of a story, I found yours quite refreshing because it took like symbolism from the church and like your own schizoaffective sort of fractured memories from that you were weaving together, and like told the whole thing in a way that was very like personal and meaningful and like first person, so no, like I've never been to church and I'm busy taking it down. It's like, no, this is like something from the inside, like it's different when you're saying the whole thing from a place of connection.
Yeah. And also I think there needs to be something like I need to say that I really was a devout Christian. I really was deeply a devout Christian well into my 20s. And I believed all of it wholeheartedly, and in a lot of ways, I feel like I still am a Christian in some senses. I still have some Christian values. I don't have sort of the negative stuff. I don't pray to Jesus anymore or whatever, but I feel like I believe in redemption. I believe in grace. I believe in forgiveness and all this type of stuff. And those aren't exclusively Christian things, but it's also pretty Christian
Yeah,
at the same
I hear
time.
you because I mean I lost
Like Christians really talk about it.
oh endlessly like every week is about redemption and about like living your faith and about being
Yeah,
gracious to other people and being ooh, walking your faith in fear and trembling, being humble, like
yeah,
being devout, not being arrogant, being humble, being helpful, helping other people, being welcoming to other people, not assuming what other people were saying.
hmm
You know, really like listening to other people. Like you would never assume that you knew what another Christian believed because everyone like you kind of thought that you all kind of believed the same thing, but like it was especially in the church I grew up in, it was very much like everyone had their own personal relationship, and so like why would I talk for you when you can talk for yourself?
yeah,
You know, like I need to re. And there's also it's also so funny because it's like Christians believe that every Christian is going to heaven, and so like you can have total theological disputes with another Christian and still respect each other because you're gonna see each other in heaven for all eternity. So you can't.
Well, I mean, there is also like the predestination and all that type of stuff, and like the book of life, and whether there are some Christians that don't necessarily believe that. And I went to school with some of them
Yes,
that
that's
were
true
like,
too. That's true
you
too.
know, but I do take your point though. For the most part, is sort of like, hey, we're on the same team and everything, and
And we have to spend eternity together. Like you're in church with people you're gonna spend eternity with.
yeah.
Like it really, it's not just like we can't be in a fight. We have to find like reconciliation and healing, and come to an agreement and like repair our relationships. Like that's taken very seriously in Christian churches. Like from what I experienced. But it's
Mhm.
also because like we're gonna be in eternity together. So if we can't get it together here on Earth when my kid kicked your kid, how are we gonna get together for like all of heaven together,
Yeah, yeah,
like we need to be practicing this now, like practicing
yeah,
like being in conflict and then being in repair, like
yeah.
I probably did grow up in a slightly more liberal church than you, but just like based on like, but they were still homophobic, they were still like transphobic. They think I'm leading the queer witch army because I'm a tarot reader and I have like a tarot clothing line, and I'm a non-believer, and I went from
Yeah,
being a youth leader to now being the leader of a I encourage people to come out if they're queer, you know what I mean? And it's just
yeah,
see how he's raising the witch army, right?
yeah,
You know, I
yeah,
teach people tarot. I'm learning, creating witches everywhere I go.
yeah. And now I'm a wizard.
You're a wizard.
I'm a wizard.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I
Yeah,
remember
I
my
mean,
parents. Yeah.
yeah, I mean
No,
that
keep going. Keep
whole
going.
like Harry Potter stuff. I remember like that was in high school. Everybody was flipping out over Harry Potter and everything, and like, was it actually a gateway to like witchcraft and all this type of stuff? And we actually debated Harry Potter in high school.
Really?
We debated Harry Potter. There were some students that were like, no, Harry Potter is really cool. I love them. And there were some kids that were like, absolutely not. My cousins in France, way, very, very fundamentalist, and they're proud of that. And
Mm-hmm.
they despise Harry Potter. I was over there for a summer, and would not stop. My dad actually read Harry Potter, so we were liberal that way. But like my whole community was like so divided around it, you know. And
Yeah.
but my aunt's family, when I went over there for a summer, they were just like, your dad is really flirting with hellfire, you know, like that's
Yeah.
really scary stuff, you know, and we know he's a devout man, so like he'll be fine, but like he could be inviting some demons into him
Oh,
or
totally.
whatever,
He
all
could be
this type
inviting
of stuff.
demons in. Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean
I'm gonna
that
have to.
that
Or Pokemon is like playing with devils, you know, like
oh
each little
yeah.
Pokemon
I mean
transformation.
that's like that was a whole other thing that like I feel like this project in a lot of ways is a lot bigger
Oh,
um,
yeah, I agree.
than what is right now on Instagram, because there's so much that could be said about like demon possession and all this type of stuff, accidental demon possession. Like you could not know what you're doing, and because there was a pentagram under your coffee cup, you got possessed by a demon or whatever. Or that like the magician at camp uh, shot a fireball or something, and that was not magic. That was witchcraft and all this type of stuff. And he has a demon in him, and now he's being ostracized at camp because people are debating about whether or not Satan lives in his soul. You know, all these sorts of things. You know, and then since then, like the camp actually kind of stopped having. I think they had a magician one time come to camp, and it created a whole stir in the community because it was like, is this man actually evil? And so then we had like ventriloquists after that, and they're evil for a whole other reason. But yeah. Yeah, I mean the demon possessions. When I was in France, I definitely got an eyeful of that happening, watching people get exercised and all
Mm.
this type of stuff. So yeah, it's yeah, there's lots of stories like that. So
I just wanted to give a shout out to Jason Young because, yeah, as he's been watching this whole talk, he's been commenting every once in a while, like, oh, and his latest is, oh my God, hilarious. And I'm
yeah,
like, yeah,
thanks,
like,
Jason. I've noticed your likes on the posts. You're a solid fan of the story. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
hmm yeah. Did you feel like it was kind of like helpful to kind of purge your soul of some of the stuff, sort of, to write about it and to like reframe it in a way that was like creative for you and generative for you and
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of like the interesting thing about this is just like actually engaging it in a creative way, engaging those memories in a creative way. And that's actually been much more helpful for me than journaling, actually. And that's kind of become my
wow.
new sort of journaling practice, is just creative writing. I don't even journal anymore. I find when I journal, things can spiral or whatever. And what I love about, like, so I've been doing these things where I go to a park, and there's this park near where I live, and it's just this big open field, and I just like sit there and I just wait for things to walk through the field, and then I'll write about them, and then I'll connect them to like emotions that I'm having or thoughts that I'm having and all this type of stuff, and just see all these things kind of going through the park, and then connecting them creatively and writing a park poem, ends up giving me much more. It gives me more than journaling would have in the park, and that's kind of how I feel like this residency was
Hmm.
sort of like my mind and my heart are sort of like this open field, and whatever is coming up, I put it down and then start connecting it all together. you know, as I'm
Wow.
just sort of like meditating on this period of time in my life, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel I can feel the meditative aspects like that you've really processed this time of your life, like you've thought about it, you've come to terms with it, you've sorry, my cat is just like doing a thing today.
That's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. No, you can really feel like that you've come to terms with it. Like there's no malice in your words. There's no secret little fuck you that's written in there. It's all like it's just about like telling hearing your own voice, telling your own voice, telling a story. I think that needs to be said. Really, at the end of the day.
Thanks, Heidi. Yeah.
Hmm. Maybe can we talk a little bit about the images because so
Yeah,
far no one knows
sure.
except for.
Sure. Yeah, the images. I've gotten
Hmm.
some good feedback from from my friends who are following the residency. Yeah. Yeah, the images. Part of this story, I mean, the words of this story talk a lot about my mom, but the images of the story are actually, in a way, sort of bringing up my dad. Because my dad would take me to there's been moments in my life where things are just not going very well at all, and my dad ends up finding an excuse to go up to the cabin up in 70 Mile and up to Green Lake and Beaver Lake, and I just kind of go there and I just kind of have my moment to just kind of like reflect, feel everything. And so I decided to kind of like add my dad into this narrative in a way by like taking pictures of these lakes that he takes me to, you know. So the background images are definitely there's that sort of thing going on there of like an appreciation of my father, um, and the relationship that we have now. Um, and the doodles, the illustrations are, yeah, they're definitely me. That's what a lot of people have been, been responding with. But I decided, like, I don't know, for me, I felt like there needed to be a little bit levity to the story or whatever, and so I decided to go with something sort of irreverent and to go with something a little lighter or whatever. Some of the images are a little disturbing, um, but I felt like they kind of have this sort of um, in some ways they're very direct. Like I actually drew them with my finger on an iPad, so it's sort of like finger drawing, um, and then yeah, so it's very direct in that way, and yeah, I don't know. I just kind of was reading the story and then would just kind of let my finger kind of guide me through what was coming up for me in that moment. And then that would be the image. I'm not an illustrator, so I find it hard talking about illustration. But I thought it would be a fun challenge, and I have done like I do illustrations and stuff like that now and then, but I'm not a visual artist. But it's definitely been a fun experience. So yeah.
Did you feel like the illustrations brought up a different aspect of your story?
Yeah. Um, I think they kind of brought up sort of that like that unhinged aspect that I was kind of like talking about before. Sort of like the um, they sort of like because it is a bit of an unhinged story. It was a bit of an unhinged environment that I was living in.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of very bizarre thoughts and all this type of stuff that were kind of flying off the handle. So in that way, I was really happy with how the illustrations turned out because they kind of like capture that unhinged spirit, and they kind of like bring that. But as it kind of like as they develop, they tell a story as well. If you pay attention to the halos and what shape the halos are in, or if they're a crown of thorns, or if they're tits or something, there's like symbolism kind of going through that.
Oh, tell us about that. Tell us about that. If you're interested, I'd love to hear it. I didn't even know about this.
Yeah, so I guess it's like, yeah, there's kind of like, so sometimes you'll see the halos with like lines in them, which are early on represent like a crown of thorns over somebody's head. I forget exactly which image. And then since that point, there's certain characters that have crowns of thorns over their heads. And so it's sort of this, a lot of the images are kind of working with like a lot of the crucifixion imagery in Christianity and what it means to go through like that sort of self-sacrifice and the agony and all that type of stuff. And sort of like this sort of a very Christian story arc of going through the worst, the darkest hour, and then coming out to the sunshine at the very end, So it's kind of, the illustrations kind of work on that level, where they literally, there's a heart that is being crucified and all this type of stuff. But as you see myself, my halo kind of eventually turns into breasts, with sort of like this holy light around it. And I guess that's sort of like the venture of going from sort of this crucifixion, this sacrificing yourself, to then moving to this sort of like holiness or this peacefulness. But that's not even enough. It then needs to move on to like a queer liberation, to have peace. It's moving beyond the Christian narrative, I guess, of like you go from the crown of thorns to your halo, and then that's the end of it. And so for me, the illustrations are going from your crucifixion to your resurrection to your queer liberation. And that's what the breasts represent to me. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Nainers, I feel like this hour and a bit has like flown by.
Yeah.
Flown by.
Yeah.
But we should probably wrap it up before we get into another segue, because I actually have something at 5, so I need to actually go in 10 minutes, and I'm like, unless you have a little thing that you want to share, like a little 5-minute tale.
A little 5-minute tale. Oh my goodness. I don't have any. I didn't prepare a 5-minute tale, Heidi. I'm so sorry.
That's fine. Thank you so much. It was really good. I mean, I've been behind the scenes with you the whole time, and I found that I learned more about your process over this artist talk. So thanks for sharing so freely and so generously, and and your outfit's fantastic. I just love your outfit. I've been enjoying it the whole time.
Thank you. Yes, I got this. I got this vest in Cache Creek, and this is my new badge. It says dramatic or International Dramatic Clown Club Platinum.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
That's
it's
perfect.
Great. It's great. Yeah.
You're getting lots of hearts on your fashion.
Oh, thanks.
I don't know if you can see it on your end, but on my end, I can see when people heart your stories and stuff.
I can see it too sometimes. I can see it too, so yeah.
Well, you just got like 4 of them in a row on that last comment, so.
Oh, well, very good. Very, very good. I am a dramatic clown, so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good to have you finally at the hammock residency too. I remember talking to you like back when you were still doing this and such, and you were like, we were talking about you doing a hammock residency and then hammock closed, you know? So it was like, it's
Mhm.
just really good that and then you were like, hey, Heidi, can I have a hammock? I'm like, actually, we have a jury process now, so submit this form, and then I can't decide.
Yeah.
But you were still chosen, so it all
Yeah.
worked out.
Well, thank you so much. It's been quite the ride. It's been really fun. I've learned so much. Um, and yeah, thanks for being there, for guiding me through it, and for talking with me, and all this
Hmm.
type of stuff. It's been quite the experience, and I'm very thankful. I'm very, very thankful for this.
Yay!
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
awesome. It's awesome. Yay. Well, we'll say goodbye here, I guess.
Okay,
But we'll be
Heidi.
we'll talk later again, I guess, too.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. Well, bye, Nainers, and bye everyone else who's watching. Thank you
Bye.
for being on the ride with us.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.